Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Chad Vossen. He is the co-founder and chief creative officer at 522 Productions. Chad, how are you doing today?
I am marvelous.
I love that you're marvelous, man. I am doing fantastic. And I am really excited to dive into how people can produce non-cheesy videos, something that you guys specialize in. And I know you have some thoughts on. Before we get into your thoughts and some tactical ways that people can go about producing better videos that resonate with their audience, let's give people a little bit of perspective, background on yourself and what you and the team at 522 Productions are up to these days.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, that's basically what 522 Productions does. Our mission is to rid the world of cheesy corporate videos. And we've been doing that for about 15 years now. So we like to kind of playfully say that we fired some of the first shots of the digital revolution. We're like a month or two older than YouTube, and we've kind of grown up online. Really kind of learning the whole craft of, producing videos for the internet basically since 2004 and have really kind of ridden the wave over the last 15 years to the tune of, we actually made the Inc. 5000 the last 2 years in a row as the fastest growing companies.
Awesome. I love it. Well, congrats on that. That is definitely an accomplishment, especially to stay on that list, not just to make it one time. So you guys are doing some things right when it comes to video, and we're going to be getting to some of those recommendations for folks on what they can do right with video as well. But let's talk about the flip side first so we can know where we don't want to go. As you mentioned, your tagline is ridding the world of cheesy corporate videos. How do you guys define cheesy? Unpack that for us, and then tell us a little bit about some of the aspects that really don't work with bad or cheesy video.
Sure. Yeah. Cheesy video, we've all seen them. We all kind of, it's, when you're standing online well, I probably shouldn't mention anybody, but you're standing online somewhere and you see there's, hey, call out to this, or this is how you do this procedure or whatever. But basically, cheesy corporate videos are things that just do not resonate with your audience. You can tell it's fake. You're disconnected from, almost the first or second that a video plays, and it just does not affect you one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go from that side to what people can do well to avoid falling into that cheesy category, because I know you guys have been doing it for a while, obviously doing some good video. You see bad out there. One of the things I remember in journalism school is that it was a lot easier to see bad design than it is to see good design. So sometimes it's tough to really call out, good video or good design because it's almost invisible. We just assume or it's easier for our minds to just go there and take it for what it is. So sometimes it's easier to call out bad video or cheesy video, but let's break down some of the things that really work. And I know for you guys, one of the things you try to focus on and help your clients with is authenticity in their videos and where they start with it, right?
No, yeah, definitely. And I think authenticity is kind of the key to, or the antidote to cheesy corporate videos, we feel.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, how people can incorporate authenticity into their videos. I know there were 3 things that you and I chatted about offline that people can really, authenticity is a buzzword, but there's still meaning to that word at the same time. So the first thing I know you wanted to share is really avoiding a top-down approach to really thinking through the content of your video. Can you share some best practices around this first point in really developing videos that can portray, that can exude authenticity?
Sure. Yeah. And I think, what we're talking about there is really, focusing on the audience and, speaking to them in a way that will really resonate with them, where they can kind of see themselves as part of the video. And, you'd mentioned the top down approaches. We see that a lot, where it's organizations or companies, they might be hiring for somebody on the front line, or, somebody in an entry level position, but it's the CEO and the C-suite people that are talking about this position. And you never actually hear from the person for the position they're hiring. You never hear about those folks that are on the front lines, those entry level positions. You don't hear or see what it is exactly that they'll be doing. Sure, they might toss in a shot or two of, Mary or Johnny, the employee at a dry erase board, and they talk about how wonderful, life is at their company or whatever. But you never really dive into anything specifically about those people on the front lines. And I think it's really important to consider the viewer's perspective, right? So a lot of companies and organizations have a lot to say, and they want to get their message out and get their point of view across. But they fail to consider what really ultimately matters to the viewer, and really fail to consider what step do we want them to take, and what are the sort of things that would interest them enough to get them to take that step. And I think that's something that's often overlooked when it comes to producing a corporate video.
Yeah, you make a really good point there about what you want people to do. I think we come back to that call to action step, because I think you probably have some advice for listeners there. But let's come back to that, because I know the second thing that really in the how of authenticity you wanted to talk about is access. Tell us what you mean by access and what that leads to when it comes to producing videos that actually are authentic.
Yeah, no, I think access is key to any really, good story, especially, from the documentary perspective. And it's really, when we're working with any organization or entity, it's like, can you actually let us get into whatever the space is that we need to get into, or see the people doing whatever it is that they do, and really kind of get into their day-to-day routines. And, a lot of organizations or companies are scared or don't want to go through all the rigmarole, or worried about legal issues or whatever it is. They sort of are protective about sort of lifting the hood up. And I think it's really, especially from the authenticity perspective, you really want to kind of dive into some of those details and really kind of sniff out what are those things that folks are going to care about, so they can literally see themselves in this position. And I think, so that's what we mean by access, is really okay, if you're talking about, somebody who's going to be working at a recycling plant or facility, can we get in there? Can we see this person open the door at 5 a.m.? Can we see the sunrise, or, get into their, what are they actually going to be doing, instead of using just kind of vague references of, the day to day that could basically be applied to any position anywhere.
Yeah, because stock B-roll is a lot like stock photography these days. We can spot it from a mile away, right? And
exactly.
you make a good point about like a facility like that, but it can happen even in just trying to recreate a scenario that you don't have access directly to, of a meeting, because there are all sorts of little details that you have to recreate, and if you're not really, really methodical about that, or even if you are, then it's not going to be like the real thing, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, we get into that situation far too often, where it's, we're not actually following a person around, or we're not, planning about, how can we follow this person into an actual meeting? And then you get into the situation where you're like, okay, everybody, let's pretend we're having a meeting here. And they forget about the fact that there should probably be a relevant piece of information on a dry erase board. There should actually be paper in front of the person, all those things that are little small details that are just, unless you're really kind of cognizant and thinking about it, that it just feels fake when you run around the office, you grab 6 different people who may or may not know each other, you toss them into a room and you say, okay, go. That's a lot to ask of employees that don't do this on a day-to-day. And it takes a little bit of warming up and encouragement to get them to actually feel like they enjoy one another's company, or they're solving actual problems, or things of that nature that a lot of companies want to kind of, convey or get across that, we love, working together here. Well, then you should probably have people, you don't just toss 2 people together and say, okay, now go have fun, or have, sip on this drink in the middle of your cafeteria. Like, try to find out, are there company outings? Like, do you actually go to baseball games, or do you do group yoga or whatever? I don't know, whatever the activity is, find out what those things are and then document those. Don't try to create them. It's going to feel fake.
All right, today's growth story revolves around search engine marketing, and we'll be shining the spotlight on Aegis Software, a company that makes software for manufacturing operations. Aegis was one of the first companies in their space to invest in search marketing, but as competition grew, their performance plateaued. To counter this, they hired Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. With unparalleled experience in inbound lead gen for B2B companies, Directive was able to increase Aegis's monthly online leads by 457%, while at the same time lowering their cost per lead by 147%. Now, I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
2 things come to mind there. One, how Gary Vee always talks about document, don't create content, because that actually leads to better content. And this point of access, a good example I heard recently from my friend Ethan Butte, who hosts the Customer Experience podcast. He was interviewing their CMO over at BombBomb, and he was talking about a boot brand that he loves. I believe it's Taft. I'm not a big boot guy myself, but Taft, T-A-F-T. And he was talking about how he loves that I think it's the owner of the business or some of the executives, they share Instagram stories about, behind the scenes and their family and those sorts of things. And that access to the brand actually really endears him to the brand and their products and that sort of stuff. And so I think, that fear of lifting the hood, as you put it earlier, Chad, is real, but it's something worth overcoming. So I love this idea of thinking about access when it comes to leaning into authenticity, which leads you to produce non-cheesy videos. So let's talk about, we've talked about, access to people who are actually, in these scenarios. Let's talk about the language that you use. I know that was the third piece that you feel is very important when it comes to leaning into authenticity, right?
Yeah, and I mean, when it's the language, you want to communicate and speak with these folks in a way that they can readily identify with, and if you're, again, hiring for an entry-level position anywhere, don't talk to them on, at C-suite level language. Don't use all sorts of acronyms that they may or may not know. Don't lose them in the weeds and the details of, high level, company goals that really don't really say anything to a lot of these people. Like, you want to communicate with them in a way that they can understand, in a way that's relevant to them. These are, if you're talking entry level, they might be younger. So relate to them in a way that, they will identify and understand. I think it's really important to be able to do that and talk to them in terminology that they can connect with. We've worked with organizations that, again, it's that kind of top-down approach where, we must interview this person, and they're 9 times out of 10 on the C-suite level. And they're saying, hey, we want to attract minority students to become a part of this profession or whatever it is. And they're just using terminology and talking to them. And, it's just completely disingenuous, and nobody within that sort of audience is going to relate to that or care about what these, old white people are saying. It just doesn't work. And they don't understand who they are. They can't communicate with them in an effective and meaningful way.
Yeah, it goes back to your previous point. The first one that you mentioned is avoiding that top-down approach to, concepting and thinking about the video. And then it comes back around into, the language that you're going to use. Maybe if it just depends on the demographic that you're trying to reach, and then thinking about the language that works for that demographic. And, there are a million different ways that might, be sliced and diced. I want to wrap things up with maybe some best practices or thoughts that people can have, Chad, as they're implementing these ways to develop more authentic videos for their brand. What are a couple of things that you might leave with folks as parting thoughts on their calls to action? Let's just say, they've applied everything here. They're creating better video, but we don't want to just leave it flat. We want to actually drive results. What are some things that you recommend to clients? Maybe one or two tips or best practices around calls to action at the end of your videos.
Oh, okay. So be clear, be specific. What is it that you want them, to do? Or what is the specific, if you want them to go to a website, give them the website. Don't speak in generalities or in sort of ambiguous, terms. If this is a video you're creating to raise money, ask for it. If this is a recruitment video, tell them where they can apply. The more specific and direct that you can be about the action that you want this person to take, the more focused your story is going to be, and the better the results you're going to have. If you can make it as easy and as simple as possible, as clear as possible, what that step or action is that you want them to take, you're going to have far better results.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you tied it into thinking through that clear, specific, very detailed call to action actually informs a better video from the beginning because you're thinking with the end in mind. So I think that's a great way to wrap things up today, Chad. If anybody listening to this would like to pick your brain a little bit more on the video front or just stay connected with you, obviously you've delivered some great little valuable nuggets here, but if they want to continue the conversation offline with you, what's the best way for them to reach out or find you?
Sure, they can call, email, or send me a pigeon. They can call me at our company line is 703-286-7696, or they can hit me up on email, which could be C Vossen, CV as in Victor, OSS as in Sam, EN as in Nancy at 522productions.com.
I love it. Chad, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Sweet. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.